Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome again. We're really glad to have you joining us for another discussion. And today we'll be focusing on child sexual abuse and some of the false narratives that can often surround it. So I'm really happy to have with us today Mr. Milton Smith. Hi, Milton. For those who might not be familiar, do you mind giving
Hi,
an introduction of yourself?
my name is Milton Smith. I am employed under the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security, the Child Care and Protection Agency. I have responsibility for Region 8 at this point in time, and I serve as a probation and social services officer for about 10 years. So I have about 10 years experience in this job, and and I love what I do, basically.
Thanks so much for being here with us today, Milton. And thank you so much for the work that you do also, which is incredibly important. I do know that it takes quite a lot, so I understand the need for the passion within the area. But yeah, when it comes to child sexual abuse, it's a really heavy topic. And, despite the prevalence, we still have a lot of lack of knowledge, lack of information surrounding it. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion today and really shedding a bit of light to those who might not be familiar with some of the things that often occur, some of the narratives that we need to challenge. So, one of the first things that we will try to explore a bit is the concept of victim blaming narratives. So, we often come across this, particularly when it comes to, women who might have experienced sexual abuse, and you hear a lot of the victim blaming beliefs that come out, such as she wanted it, or what was she doing there, and all these different things. And children, of course, are not exempt from these narratives. So what do you think really drives these beliefs that children can be responsible for the abuse they experience?
Um, One thing that I think that drive the is for the perpetrator to feel comfortable in their action. Um, by blaming the victim, it removes attention from the perpetrator of the act and hides that individual and what they would have done, and moves the attention from the perpetrator to the child, to make the child feel as though they're lying, to make the child feel as though they're lesser worth, their opinions are not valued, and they have no rights. The whole system of control, the cycle of power, right? People who are more powerful makes persons who are less powerful feel as though they have no power within themselves, to to come out of their situation. And so the perpetrator always wants the victim to feel less of themselves, because they don't want the matter to be reported. If the matter is reported, or if persons feel as though they have that power to report matters, then it takes away power from the perpetrator, and it takes the shed light off of the perpetrator and makes the victim feel a sense of worth, even coming out of their abusive act. So that narrative of victim blaming, is a tool that has been implemented by perpetrators, to make the victim feel less of themselves.
Well, thanks so much for that. A lot of times when we talk about victim blaming, we think about the larger society, larger people's response towards survivors of sexual abuse. But it's never quite framed that way, in the sense that this is something that perpetrators actively push, that's something that they actively supported. And so it's interesting to look at it from that dynamic, because in that way it makes a lot of sense why it's still so maintained, like why it's still so common within our society, because we do have a culture of protecting abusers. So if it is that abusers are trying
Mhm.
to protect themselves, then the larger society is more than happy to go along with that narrative also that they're trying to sell. So I think that's a really important way of looking for it. And you mentioned some of the victim blaming narratives that can often surround children who have experienced sexual abuse. What do you think are some of these myths, some of these narratives that can be particularly harmful that we might need to really stamp out quickly?
Um, it's important that when we're working with children, it's important that we do not approach the issue that the child is lying. It is not our place to determine whether the child is lying or telling the truth. It is important for us to listen first, and allow the authorities to determine um, what actually is happening, right? Oftentimes they make it seem as though the child is delinquent. And because of their delinquent behavior, they're lashing out. And so they're trying to divert the attention from themselves and place it on other things. And when we see children behaving in a certain way, it's important for us to observe and objectively analyze what is happening in their lives that would have led them to that state of need, of attention, um, that, that is taking part at this particular time. It might not be that something would have happened to them immediately. It might have meant that something would have happened to them over a period of time. And they're actually at this point in their life is where they're acting out based on what would have they would have experienced, right? Oftentimes, we try to associate the children that they are having teenage issues, and they don't know how to deal with their teenage issues. They have self-esteem issues, right? That is hiding the real problem, and the real problem might be that these children would have some point in their life been affected by child sexual abuse that was never reported, that they kept silent for years because of the threats of I will kill your mother, I will kill your father, I will kill your baby brother or sister. And hence the child decides, all right, then I'm just going to keep it silent, and I'm just going to live with this. And nothing that happens to us over a period of time would go unattended. At some point in our life, it will show up, it will start manifesting. And because we did not deal with it at that point when it happened, at this point now is when we start seeing the manifestation and the full-blown behavior that would have been suppressed over a period of time. We know that trauma, or the effects of trauma on the lives of children. And so when we don't attend to it, it creates additional issues that can create developmental problems also.
Yeah, and that's why it's really so important that we have early intervention, but more particularly looking at prevention. So educating children, but also educating parents, others within the communities to be aware of what abuse signs look like, so that they're able to more effectively
Mhm.
provide type of support for those who are vulnerable. So Milton, you mentioned some of the
Correct.
effects, the traumatic effects that sexual abuse can have on a child, particularly in the long term. So what could you say to get a bit more specific when it comes to that? What do you think are some of the short and long-term effects that, this can really have on a child?
Short-term effect, you will see the manifestation of delinquent behavior, promiscuity, children, children lashing out, anger issues. Long-term effect is where they will have relationship issues with their spouses, with their own extended family, with their children being overprotective when they get their children. Um, they become so overprotective that their children feel as though they're confining them and they're not given that level of freedom. It can affect long term, it can affect their work relationship when they get into the work environment, long term effect. It can affect their identity where they don't understand truly um, who they are because and this sometimes happen in males who would have experienced child sexual abuse, and I say sometimes because I don't want my statements to be carried and to be misunderstood that people who have identity issues, it is because of child sexual abuse. So sometimes it is triggered by that, where the child don't understand if they're male or if they're female because of the traumatic event that would have happened to them. And so they start adopting a different lifestyle, a different behavior type. That society itself will attach labels to them, not fully understanding what they would have experienced that was never addressed and was never dealt with. And so we have so many range of issues that we can point out.
Okay, Melton, you're frozen. Can you confirm that you're with us still?
Children jumping out their sleep at night because of the traumatic event that would have happened to them. And so these are among a few of the issues that continues to plague victims of child sexual abuse that sometimes go unnoticed and sometimes are clouded by other issues. And really, as a counselor or as a professional, you have to be able to interact with that individual, interact with that child to understand what really would have happened that triggered the behavior that we're now experiencing, right? And so it is important that we have professional help offered to children and adults, if not addressed at an early stage, for children and adults to navigate their challenges in life and come to a place where they feel comfortable to interact, to share, and to get the necessary help that they need.
Mhm. Yes, I completely agree, and thank you so much for those points that you made. I wanted to touch a bit on the ways in which we treat boys versus girls who have experienced CSA, because we clearly have a very drastic difference in how we navigate those reports and, of course, the support that we provide. What are some of the differences that you have noted over the years within your work in a way in which we treat boys and girls when it comes to child sexual abuse?
At the agency here, we don't have much male figures. And sometimes it might not always be possible to have a male engage a male on something that would have affected them. But probably there is need to have more males to engage other males who have been affected by child sexual abuse and who would have navigate their lives and become somebody by dealing with the issues that would have affected them. Um, Maybe to say that we have challenges here with dealing with males who have been affected by child sexual abuse. There's a system to deal with all children. There's a procedure to deal with all children that are affected by child sexual abuse, whether male or female. And however, sometimes you find that males are not that open to speak about their child sexual trauma, right? They often cloud it with other behaviors that 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 makes you seem that something else is happening in their lives. And I did make mention to that prior, that if you're not tactful and if you're not, you don't have the know of how to help them to come to that point of not acceptance, but that point where they feel comfortable to express what would have affected, what would have caused them to behave the way they behave, then it could create additional issues for the boy or for the girl, right? And that's why we have implemented the Child Advocacy Centers, which is a program under the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security Child Care Protection Agency that seeks to help create that atmosphere for both boys and girls, to tell their story, to say what would have happened to them, and to have some level of justice meted out for on their behalf, to hold persons accountable for their behavior, right? And that's why I love the concept of the Child Advocacy Center, because it delivers that sense of, okay, it's all right, we're here to listen to you. And all of these key persons that play a part in this role, they're here to sit and they're here to allow you to tell your story. It's not about anybody influencing you to tell your story. It's about listening to the child's story and documenting the child's story and having the necessary procedures followed to get that child some level of justice for what would have transpired to them, right? And then it has the trauma focused interventions, counseling that helps the child to navigate, to develop coping mechanisms, right? To move from one stage of their life to another stage of their life. And so I feel that at the agency here, we provide a level playing field for both males and females to express and to report their issues. We have the lines that anybody can call, the 914 that was created, the iMatter app that was created, that opens door for persons to come and share their complaints about what is affecting them. Maybe we can make it a little bit more open. There's always avenues that we can tweak to make the service better. No service is completely 100%. There's always avenues to improve for improvement. I don't know if I would have answered your question there.
Oh yes, yes, certainly. I also just wanted to touch a bit on, so you focused on, the administrative response when it comes to the different ways in which boys and girls are treated, which of course the priority is to ensure that there isn't a difference and they're treated equally and
Correct.
all cases are handled in that manner. But there is a difference in the ways that, society, whether that's the home, the local community groups, they tend to treat those cases. When it's girls, there's a culture of protection around girls, which can be
Okay.
both good but also very, very harmful. And then when it comes to boy, there's a culture of just kind of a free for all. There's a saying that boys don't need as much as girls when it comes to raising them, and this idea really helps to push a narrative that they don't need support. So when it comes to experiencing sexual abuse, the responses can be very, very different. Would you want to speak to, that kind of cultural differences?
Mhm. You see, there's always a need for education. And when we go out there now, we say to persons, not only girls are sexually abused, but boys are sexually abused. There's some people who still believe that it's only girls that are sexually abused and people don't molest boys. But when you bring to them the reports that are being made at the level of the agency, about boys who are sexually abused, and it is shocking. It is really, really shocking, that boys are coming forward now, that males are coming forward now to say, to call it what it is, right? And deal with it as an issue and have that issue addressed and get them the help that they need. But there is greater awareness that needs to be created on the issue. And I think ChiLink is doing one of those initiatives which is the 1,000 Boys, where they're shedding that, they're turning on that light on male sexual abuse, right? To help persons to understand that boys are sexually abused equally as girls, and it creates identity crisis for the individual. While we expect boys to be this macho, and because of how society has implemented, or the projections that they have placed on males, this macho-ness, behind all of that macho, men are hurting, boys are hurting, but they put on this whole facade so that society can can be comfortable with them and not judge them because of the trauma that they would have experienced. And so we need to create an environment through awareness, through active participation, that is okay for a boy to express that he is sexually abused, and he should not feel marginalized, because of what would have happened to him, because he is in no way responsible for what would have happened to him. We are Men are no way responsible. Oftentimes we see men also as the perpetrators of these acts. And because we see men as the perpetrators of these acts, sometimes it's difficult to even believe a boy's story, even if a boy come and say, a girl sexually assaulted me. No, about girls can sexually assaulted you, and we add all the imageries, to make the boy feel less of himself. Did you have an erection? If you had an erection, then the girl did not sexually molest you, right? But that does not erase the fact that you were sexually molested. Whether you had an erection or if you didn't have an erection, it was a violation on your part. You said no, and the fact that those words were said, and the individual decided that they can still, violate your space, it is considered abuse, right? They would have forcefully, intruded on your space. And it's like your home, somebody break into your home, you feel uncomfortable, no matter how you receive counseling, no matter how people come, the security systems that you would have put in place. Every time you turn that door, you have flashbacks of the incident that would have happened, right? And I want persons to really understand, and to think about it in this light of a breaking into or breaking entry into your car, into your home, somebody stole your purse, somebody snatched a chain from your neck, right? Every time you walk in that location, you feel as though this is a whole reoccurrence of this incident. Every time you turn the door of your house, it's a reoccurrence of this incident. Every time you open the door of your car that somebody would have broken into, you feel violated, right? And that sense of violated creates insecurities, right? That affects relationships, right? And so it's important that we help our young men, right, to find their identity, to understand their identity, right, and to navigate the challenges in their lives.
I completely agree with you, and thanks so much for all those great points. I do know that, earlier you mentioned some of the resources persons can access, such as 914, the iMatter app, the child advocacy centers with the ministry. Do know ChildLink also has the child advocacy centers, which I
Correct.
believe partner with the ministry on, or is that separate?
The child advocacy centers,
Yeah.
the child advocacy centers is a program under the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security, Child Protection Agency. The child advocacy center is partially funded by the ministry through the Child Care Protection Agency.
Okay.
And
Okay.
ChildLink and Road Blossoming, would have their independent funders that helps them to carry out the programs too, right?
Okay. Perfect. Thanks
For
for that.
continuity and deal with other things that they would do. but these are programs under the Child Care and Protection Agency. And that's where the clientele come from, to support the initiative and help it to be functional and all of these things,
Okay,
right?
great.
So
So in
the
addition to
CACs,
so in
go right
addition
ahead.
in addition to these resources, could you provide like additional resources that persons can access when it comes to child sexual abuse?
Yes, so there are services provided, age appropriate services provided by the ministry, for not only younger children, but adults, through the probation department. We have the domestic violence unit of the ministry. That's a 914 line that persons can call. We have counseling that the ministry provides, when a case comes into to the Child Care and Protection Agency. It always remains a client of the Child Care and Protection Agency. Even though we would refer that client to the Child Advocacy Center for counseling, the case remains with the Child Care and Protection Agency until that matter would have gone through court. The child would have gotten the necessary justice, or if not, the court sees it fit to dismiss the matter, or DPP decides that there's not sufficient evidence to institute a charge. And when I say all of this, is to help persons to understand that we do not determine whether a person is lying or telling the truth. It is not up to us, right? It is not up to us. It's up to us to provide that individual with as much opportunities to express what would have happened to them, and let the court system decide whether there's insufficient evidence or there's not sufficient evidence. And it's not always that that the person is lying. It could be that there's not sufficient evidence to prosecute, right? Or something would have happened along the way that created that false impression that led the child, led the case to be determined in that nature. But it's important for us to support the child right through the process, right? So we provide the counseling, we provide the assistance through the police. The police will provide the investigative services. The courts will provide the judicial services, which will determine the outcome of the case. So it's a collaborative approach that is taken by key stakeholders, and also the Georgetown Public Hospital, the doctors there who would have to do the medical and these things. So it's a collaborative approach that is taken on by numerous of stakeholders that works towards the best interest of the child.
And that's really how it needs to be, that collaborative approach, because it is a national issue.
And let me say the other thing, the key stakeholder in this process is the child and family, right? So while we have all of these external parties that play an important role in the process, the child and the family are the key stakeholders, because the child will have to tell his or her story. It's important that the child tell his story. I can't tell the story to the child. The child has to tell the story, right? And the parent have to play that part in supporting the child through this process so that we can get the justice.
Thanks so much for that, Melton. And I'm sure those watching now have a list of resources that they can tap into if they themselves might be experiencing abuse, or if they know of others who are. So it's great to have that information out in the public. So Melton, we're wrapping up right now. So is there anything that I might not have asked you that you feel important to highlight, or a lasting message you would like to leave with the audience?
I would just like to encourage persons to support children. At this point in time, we are commemorating Child Protection Week, which was observed, which started on Saturday last and will conclude on this Saturday. The first activity that we had was the tree planting exercise. which is the nature nurture concept. We're using nature as an approach to nurture children, plant a tree and nurture it with that child. As the tree grows, we observe how the tree grows and what we have to put in, the efforts we have to put in to help that tree to grow. And it's that same concept we want to transfer to parents to understand that you have to put in the effort, you have to put in that extra, you have to make that sacrifice to ensure that your child is properly nurtured and reaches that stage that they're self-sufficient and they're able to develop and make contributions to society, right? And then we had the spotlight, the street light campaign that was launched on Sunday, Monday, and at that, where we try to help persons to shine the light on begging in our streets, where we want persons to understand the risk and the exposure that we put children through and how we make them vulnerable even when we stop at those stoplights sometimes and just reach out our hand and give $100, we are encouraging a behavior that is creating vulnerability, that is putting children at risk, that is making children vulnerable to all sorts of dangers. And so we want to encourage persons, let us try to report those incidents where we see children begging on the streets. Right? Let us report it and get them the necessary help. The ministry and the minister would have committed at the launch of that activity to helping families to get the necessary help they need to develop and move from one stage to the other. And like that, all of these activities are geared, and this activity here too is geared at shedding light and helping persons to understand the real issues in our society and how we need to work together to address those issues. It takes a community, it takes a country, and it takes a village to raise a child. And if you hear something, you know something, let us work together to get something done towards the protection of children.
Thank you so much, Melton. And I really love the call to action when it comes to a really communal response towards addressing child sexual abuse. It's very important to highlight that we all have a role to play in this. We can all impact and contribute towards alleviating this a bit more. So yeah, everyone has a role to play. And with that note, I think it's great to end there. Thanks so much for your time today and for all your perspectives and for sharing the information that you have. Take care.
Thank you, Joe.